Welcome to Cardinals Cover 2 with Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki. Cardinals Cover 2 is brought to you by Arizona Cardinals Podcasts. Visit azcardinals.com/podcasts. From Cardinals headquarters, here's Craig Grialou and Mike Jurecki.
You see that, MJ? It was way off in the distance. Now it's just a little bit closer. It's called a light at the end of the tunnel. That's right, the regular season almost here.
Tick-tock.
Still one more preseason game left. That is Thursday night at University of Phoenix Stadium, 7 p.m., 3:30 is the pregame coverage on the Arizona Cardinals radio network. But, you know, earlier on this Wednesday, you and I were out at the stadium for the kickoff luncheon, and that is kind of one of the, not final signals, but one of the main signals that says, yes, the regular season is right around the corner.
Yeah, it was a great event. As you mentioned, we both were there, and, Paul Calvisi and Ron Wolfe did a nice job at the MCing. Michael Bidwell spoke. They had a nice little montage and a video of the late John McCain. Steve Wilkes spoke, and it's really, for our listeners out there and people that are watching, we appreciate it. You usually have a player at every single table, and then you're allowed to get autographs throughout, and so people are bouncing around, and it's just a good environment where, yeah, they've been grinding, but now it's a chance to kind of mingle with the fan base, and all the coaches were there, and Wilkes just talked about his staff and how he's excited about this year, so it was a good event. I would consider like a pep rally because, players, a lot of players are not going to play tomorrow night, and then after Thursday night, they're going to get a couple days off, and then it's going to start. And we're talking about 17 consecutive weeks of football.
And some of those players just won't be here anymore. That's just a fact of life. The 90-man roster needs to be reduced to 53 by this weekend, Saturday to be specific. And we will talk a lot about that throughout the show here on Wednesday and on Friday, as well as we've challenged ourselves to come up with the 53-man roster, what we think the 2018 Cardinals should look like.
Now, how many rough drafts have you done so far?
I just do one. I can't. It's just one.
You're a big highlighter guy.
I use the
everything.
So we've established the fact on this show, Cards Cover 2, that you love crayon.
Right. Well, I just think everything shouldn't be in pen because it should be really in sand, so we could just scratch it out. The technical term is it's in pencil, and then you can erase it. But I noticed when I walk by your desk and I come over and talk to you, you used a highlighter like a lot.
Yes.
So I was wondering, you had a couple players on there that you were questionable about. And we're not going to give it out today. It's going to come up on Friday because we're going to do the true evaluation from the start of training camp, or 15 to 18 practices, 4 preseason games, and then we're going to come on the air on Friday, and we're going to give you our 53-man roster. And I still think, and we're going to get into this today, I still think there's probably 5 to 8 jobs available now. If you don't make the 53, they would like to bring the majority of these guys back on the practice squad. You have to clear waivers first. So the Cardinals feel good about the roster as a whole, but I do think they're going to be active in the waiver wire.
This is Cards Cover 2 with you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3 p.m., and we invite your questions via social media, hashtag CardsCover2, hashtag CardsCover2, using the number 2. We'll get into those a little bit later on in the show. But without further ado, time to take off on this Wednesday. Here is what you expect on the show. The fight for 53, as we talked about, enters its final round. Where are those roster spots available? How many? But exactly the position battles. And 2 players in particular, Jermaine, Gresham, and Markus Golden. Will they be on the active roster in week 1? So that is what we can look forward to here on this Wednesday. But first, the news of the day, and it centers around the rookie quarterback Josh Rosen. Will he or won't he? His status for Thursday still, quote, head coach Steve Wilkes said, up in the air, and it's been a debate now for the last couple of days. What do you do if you're Rosen? Do you play him in order to get him some more reps, or do you back off because it is the 4th preseason game? He's 1 snap away from being the starter, and do you risk hurting him? And now all of a sudden, if Bradford goes down and Rosen's unavailable, then what do you do?
Well, I understand, and because it's the 4th preseason game, they're not going to play their starting offensive line. So I understand, and Wilkes has maintained that, listen, we don't want to – he's got a ton of reps in practice. Now, when you look at the preseason as a whole, he's only played in 2 preseason games, 46 total snaps. You look around some of the other first-round picks in the first round, they played more. Obviously, Lamar Jackson played in the Hall of Fame game, so he'll have 5 total preseason games. Sam Darnold was announced a starter with the Jets today. He's played in at least 3 preseason games. I don't know if he's going to play in the 4th. Baker Mayfield's got a lot of time because he could be the backup if Stanton doesn't win the job as a backup to Tyrod Taylor. So, again, I understand. He's got a ton of reps in practice, but you would like to see him in live action. Like we talk about Belichick, the only way you get better is by playing. And Josh sat at his locker yesterday, and he said, I want to play. Now, for our listeners out there, maybe that weren't in Dallas, we weren't there, but reports where he was throwing the football before the game to Larry Fitzgerald. Larry did not play in that game. I'm assuming they're going to put him through a workout tomorrow before the game. So it's not the same when guys are coming at you and the bullets are flying, so to speak. But the main thing is he's got a grasp of the offense, but clearly Sam Bradford's a starter. And I wish I had $1 and I would split it with you. Every story we read.
You give me 50 cents. That's very kind of you.
Yeah, I mean, we'll split it.
That's right. Okay.
I mean, you're a partner, right? Yeah, so
50-50.
we would split it. All those stories out there that were written from the draft night until maybe the last couple of weeks. Josh Rosen, he's the most ready quarterback, and he can be when you look at this draft class. We need to let that play out. Josh Rosen will be the starter in week 1. It was never going to happen as long as Sam Bradford stayed on the same plan he was, according to the doctors and the medical staff. They were make sure they were going to take care of him in training camp, not to put him on overload. We watched that. They did that. So for all the people out there that thought Josh Rosen would start in week 1, that's not happening. It's Sam Bradford, and hopefully Bradford plays the majority of the season because this team could have a chance to be in the postseason. Now, we know the future is Josh Rosen.
Cardinals this week had only one practice. That was on Tuesday. And, yes, Rosen, during the open portion to the media, was out there handing the ball off, tossing to receivers as well. After practice, head coach Steve Wilks asked about Rosen and whether we would see him on Thursday.
I thought he threw the ball well. He didn't have a problem for us taking it underneath the center, the snap, and I thought his execution was on point. So it's still up in the air. Whether or not I want to play him, I want him to go through the week and see how he feels, and I'll make that decision on game day. I think as a rookie, the more and more you see different looks, particularly, a 3-4 defense, I think it's important because he's going to be able to see that throughout the year.
Yeah, that's one thing that we really haven't touched on is the fact that the first 3 preseason games were against 4-3 defenses. This one being 3-4. Unfortunately, word out of Denver is they're going to rest like 35 to 38 players. All 22 starters will not play. I assume that could be for the Cardinals. So, you just look at it from that standpoint. Again, the perfect world, the first string offensive line's out there. Likely they're going to err on the side of caution, and I completely respect that from the head coach. This is a grind. It's a long season, and we know that Bradford's history says maybe he plays 12 games, 14, hopefully 16. But if not, you've got a young guy that has a grasp of the offense, and you'd have to change the little things. Now they're going to keep the same playbook, but the fact is that he really has made a lot of strides since he's been here.
In these 46 snaps that you talked about here in the preseason, Rosen 16 of 29 for 148 yards and a touchdown. After practice, Rosen, he too spoke to the media and made it very clear he would like to play.
It was up to you. Would you like to play in this last game?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to play.
Do you feel like you need to get more ready?
I think all reps are good reps. I think I'd love to take as many as possible because, obviously, that's how you get to learn offense best.
It wouldn't look good if a rookie said, "No, I don't want to play."
Yeah, that wouldn't be great.
Is there anything specific you would be looking for if you were out there that you're working on?
No, just continually to feel the pocket and get behind center and call cadence and call plays. And we've got different colored jerseys in practice, so you never really fully get a complete rep and throw the ball and get hit and everything. So all those are valuable. And obviously, you want as many as you can.
I saw your film from game 1 to game 2. Did you notice a difference? Did you like the progress?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just continually repping it, and just kind of, like I said, you just get to feel the pocket a little bit more and just keep progressing. Every day it's all valuable.
I think it was early in camp, he used the word buffering. There were times you get back there and, things sort of, you're like, okay, you're like maybe a little bit of indecision. How much better are you now with the buffering, and how often does that happen these days?
It still happens a little bit, but that's why I'm trying to convince Coach to let me play in this last preseason game. So.
Did you convince him to let you play?
I don't know. I want to play. I mean, I just want to get better regardless of whether 10 quarterbacks ahead of me or no quarterbacks ahead of me.
And that right there, I'm trying to convince Coach to let me play. One, you love to hear it. And I think, is he ready? I'm sure he's ready. Coach Wilkes mentioned and asked specifically on Tuesday, is Josh Rosen ready? And he said yes. Now, yes, if Rosen needed to play week 1, he'd be fine. But I think it's the confidence and the seeing the different looks and not seeing the Cardinals defense every single time, or even the scout team looks, because it is different when you have fans in the stands and the referees on the sidelines and the lights are on, that it feels different. And I'm in agreement with you, MJ, that I think that they'll probably err on the side of caution and go through a full speed, act like it's live pregame warm-up. But that's different than someone trying to rush you and, grab at the ball or knock you, sideways or off your spot. And if it doesn't happen Thursday, it's not going to happen, knock on wood, until, 2019, depending on what happens with Sam Bradford.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you in the perfect scenario, if they really wanted to put the first string offensive line out there, then this would be feasible. But they're not going to do that. There's more at stake listen, I never bring up preseason records. It'd be great for this team to build confidence going into the season. But the most part is he has to be ready. And listen, I get it. The mental reps are in the film room on the practice field, but also live reps, you just can't substitute in practice. But when you listen to him talk, he's so intelligent when it comes to playing the quarterback position. I mean, I've been thoroughly impressed with him, his knowledge. He asks questions all the time. Why this? Why that? He's part of that why generation. And so you could see he's grasping everything. And the thing, he's working with Sam Bradford, and then you throw in a guy like Mike Glennon. I mean, he's got a good quarterback room, and you could see the development since he arrived.
By the way, 2003, the last time the Arizona Cardinals went undefeated 4-0 in the preseason. It means absolutely nothing.
And how'd that work out?
Yeah, well, we'll just let that slide here. Cards Covered 2, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3 p.m. Get your questions, your comments in using the hashtag CardsCovered2, hashtag CardsCovered2, using the number 2 to get involved in the show. And you can watch live on azcardinals.com/live video. Also find us on YouTube. Search Cards Covered 2. Miss a show, you can download it as a podcast via Google Play Music, SoundCloud, or TuneIn. So if Rosen does not play on Thursday against the Denver Broncos, that takes something to watch against that final preseason game. But there are maybe 5-6 position spots available on this active 53-man roster, and specifically there are position groups that I think this final preseason game matters. Head coach Steve Wilkes mentioned 2 in specific, wide receiver and cornerback. Those 2, MJ, we've been talking about maybe even back when this all began in April. Who's after Larry Fitzgerald? Who's opposite Patrick Peterson?
Yeah, and they went out and made the trade for Jamar Taylor. He will be the day one starter. I think they got some good depth with Ben Wickery back there. We'll see what happens with Brandon Williams. I know he struggled at the corner position throughout his young career, being a former third-round pick. But he's one of the top 3 special teams players on the roster. And so there's going to be guys that we're talking about next week that may not have a role in offense or defense, but they're going to have a vital role on special teams. And you know how I feel about Rudy Ford. He's my breakout special teams player this year. I think Brandon Williams. Now, I still think to look for another corner. Dietrich Nichols, he's played well. You see he gets a lot of his hands on a lot of balls over the last 2 games. Chris Campbell's in the mix. He was a 5th-round pick. He's got good size, long arms. He can play press coverage. But how many do you keep at that position? I think they keep 9 defensive backs. So it could be 4 corners and then 5 safeties. We talked about, possibly a guy like Zeke Turner. He's listed as a safety, but he's really a hybrid linebacker. He is just strictly going to play on special teams. So I think they've solidified opposite of Peterson with two guys in Taylor and Ben Wickery. Hopefully they can stay healthy, and then we'll see what hits the waiver wire if they want to bring somebody else
And in the wide receiver position, it is completely still wide open. There's Larry Fitzgerald, Chad Williams, Christian Kirk, those three definitely. And then after that, it very well could depend on what happens on Thursday, or maybe what doesn't happen if someone just stumbles and doesn't show up on the field. But whether that's Bryce Butler, Greg Little, two veterans that I think the Cardinals hoped would have done something prior to this Thursday to where they didn't have to play and be on the field Thursday night. And then you got a bunch of young guys, Trent Sherfield, Jalen Tolliver, who are trying to push the envelope and make their way on the 53-man roster.
Yeah, I think Greg Little, and it's a good story. Obviously, he's been humbled, and anybody can appreciate a second chance considering he was out of football. You know, he was drafted in the second round by the Browns, and then he was out of. He hasn't really played in an NFL game since 2015. He did not help his chances, in my opinion. I still think J.J. Nelson has a spot on this team just because of the speed and the deep ball. Now, we know maybe when Bradford's in there, they may not spin it down the field, but you still have him as an option. Maybe he's a decoy. I think Bryce Butler, I think he needs to show a little bit more. He had the foot injury. He's had a couple drops, but I think he's a veteran guy, and you need some veteran guys in that meeting room along with Larry Fitzgerald. And then you throw in a guy like Trent Sherfield. He's another guy that's going to play on special teams.
And has made plays on special teams.
Yes, including the touchdown that he jumped on. So, special teams, I know we talk about offense and defense, and rightfully so, but special teams, they've really put an emphasis on the back of the roster that can really help them in coverage units. Andy Lee's done a really good job. They got to hope that Phil Dawson's very consistent this year, especially in close games. So, overall, that's what we're getting down to. But if I had to guess right now, the six receivers, I would say Fitz, Kirk, Williams, Bryce Butler, J.J. Nelson, and Trent Sherfield. And I think Sherfield could be active on game day because of special teams.
And I think that's a position that they look for as well this weekend as far as maybe making a waiver claim or perhaps maybe even a trade. This preseason game, though, does matter for wide receivers, for cornerbacks. There's some linebackers, maybe even some defensive backs that could kind of squeeze into that mix as far as making the 53-man roster. So for head coach Steve Wilks, yes, this Thursday is a very big deal.
Well, it's the whole body of work, but even the last preseason game can make a difference, particularly when guys are very close, which we have quite a few guys that are close. So, again, they'll make that final decision on how they perform.
Now, getting back to the cornerback discussion and Patrick Peterson specifically, what we saw in Dallas on Sunday night, let's hope is a sign of things to come, whether it's the pick six or forcing a fumble. He's more active. He's more physical. And this is a different Patrick Peterson than we've seen, at least in my opinion, since he's been here as an Arizona Cardinal. One, I wouldn't say he looks younger, but he's talking like he's rejuvenated in that locker room about what this defense presents to him and what he potentially could do in this defense.
Yeah, and one of the first things they said when they got hired between Wilks bringing in Mike McCoy and Al Holcomb is, we're going to fit to our personnel. I mean, our scheme's going to fit to the personnel. And Steve Wilks, we talk about him being a former defensive backs coach, and I asked him in the press conference on Monday, what was that conversation like with Patrick? Because he's bought in 1,000%. And we haven't seen him because he really hasn't had to where he's got to be an open field tackler, coming off the edge to get to the quarterback, where, that to me, the ball was coming out, but the fact that he was able to judge where the tackle was going to be but the ball was coming out. But the main thing is he didn't avoid contact, and that was encouraging to me.
And one of the big proponents of a Patrick Peterson, Cardinals analyst Ron Wolfley, who on this week's Big Red Rage spoke very, very highly of number 21.
And if you've got a guy who is a great talent, who also is a great brain and can anticipate that, looking at the quarterback, cheating, cluing is what we used to call it, and now you can jump routes like Patrick Peterson jumped while playing quarters, 4 deep, 3 underneath. When you play quarters, Paulie, 4 deep, 3 underneath, you know where the weakness is of that? The out route. The exact route that Patrick Peterson jumped and picked for a pick six. Why? because he knew, you know what, that's the weakness. I know what you're going to do. We're playing quarters. You know it. You're going to run the out, right? Because that's the weakness of the – boom, jumped it because of anticipation.
Again, you can hear more of Ron Wolfley and Paul Calvisi coming up this week on the Big Red Rage, the final dress rehearsal for the Big Red Rage before the regular season, as we are just a little over a week and a half left before Week 1 against Washington coming up on September 9th. And speaking of Week 1, there is a huge question, actually a couple of questions now facing not only the head coach, but General Manager Steve Keim, the entire front office, and I'll throw in the medical team as well, and that is Jermaine Gresham and Markus Golden, two players who were placed on the physically unable to perform list ahead of training camp, have been there all training camp, all preseason, and will they be taken off now ahead of Week 1? And certainly when you're talking about, let's go individually, first Jermaine Gresham. And, of course, it was Week 17 last season. He suffered the Achilles injury. And, you know, we've seen him working out on the side, but we haven't seen him go through any drills whatsoever. He can't because he's on the PUP. But this is a decision with Gresham. When you look at the tight ends, MJ, there's Ricky Seals-Jones, there's Gabe Holmes. Okay, if Gresham's not active Week 1, is there someone else currently on the roster, or do you have to go outside to find that third tight end?
Yeah, so when you look at that, I mean, if there's somebody available out there, definitely they're going to try to shore up the position. But when it comes to PUP and Coach Wilkes, he had mentioned that they're close, and that's really great news. Now, does that mean they're going to play in Week 1? I think that remains to be seen. Do they play in the first couple of weeks? Again, I think that remains to be seen. The good news is by not starting the season on PUP, Craig, that means if you do, you miss 6 games, and then it takes you about 2 weeks to get ready and practice. The only concern I would have is once these guys are cleared, and hopefully sooner rather than later, they started getting into football shape. Now, we know they're going to be game planning when they get back on the practice field next Wednesday. I'm sure they've already watching film on the Redskins, so he'll have to catch up there. But the main thing is, note they haven't had any setbacks in their rehab, and hopefully they don't have any setbacks when they get back out there. Are they going to play 65 snaps a game? Probably the first couple? Probably not. They like that rotation. And Gresham probably doesn't get enough credit for being an inline blocker. We know with Seals-Jones is a matchup issue down the field, but Gresham is a guy that's willing to get dirty, and he's willing to be physical. He does talk trash. He tells me he talks a lot of trash in the game, and guys try to get into his opponent's head, and he's got some flags for that. But you can't, that's him just trying to be physical on the football field. So it'd be good to have him back if this team really wants to run the football, which I think they do. But the main thing is continue to rehab, no setbacks, and once they get cleared by the medical staff, then the coaches will be able to make a decision. How do they fit in offense or defensively?
Well, and with Gresham specifically, it's his ability to catch the football as well. And we just got done talking about the uncertainty in the wide receivers room. If you have a healthy and an active Jermaine Gresham already, you are a better football team because he is a quality receiver, one, and can make tacklers miss, get those yards after contact, after the catch, which would be certainly beneficial because we haven't seen this team throw the ball downfield as of yet. And it's an interesting decision because whether it's Gresham or if it's Markus Golden, if you think that they are going to be okay and available week 3, week 4, then you put them on the active roster, 53-man, and so the first couple of weeks they're not dressing on game day. They're listed inactive. But if there's any thought that this injury for Gresham, it's an Achilles, and for Markus Golden, it's an ACL, that it's going to be lingering and pushing into week 7 or week 8, well, then you keep them where they are, and you say, you know what, we're going to err on the side of caution, and you're going to miss these first 6 weeks, 6 games, and then we'll make a decision. Because if they're both close according to Wilkes, 1, that's good. Gresham is an Achilles, but Markus Golden, that's an ACL that was week 4. Usually it takes a full year, so maybe he comes back week 4 in 2018. Okay, that's a full year. But now it's the question of how confident are you in your ability, and then how sound is that knee, specifically talking about Markus Golden?
Yeah, like I said, I mean, they got a great medical staff here. They're not going to put him on the field if they're not healthy. But I just think that the conditioning part's going to be the biggest thing. You know, again, you can go work out for 2 hours, you can go run in the heat, but when you got to stop and go back to the sidelines, maybe get a little tight, come back out, it's different. But clearly, when healthy, Markus Golden and Chandler Jones, they're one of the better tandems in the National Football League getting to the quarterback. Curious to see how he fits in this. He did play with his hand in the dirt at Missouri, and so it's not new to him, just like David Johnson had a fullback in college, not new to him. So they're not like trying to jam, a square peg into a round hole, so to speak. So from that standpoint, now for Golden, you mentioned week 4. He was at the luncheon today, does not have a knee brace on. He looked fine walking. I know it's from walking and playing in an NFL game are completely different, but it seems like, again, they're on schedule. Now it's just a matter of when they get cleared and then the conditioning part. The good news would be, let's say they can come back and play the last 13 or 14 games. That would be huge for this team versus missing the first 6 weeks and then taking 2 weeks to get back into shape. So the main thing is no setbacks, and then when they get cleared, now they can start working them into the game plan.
And when you talk about Markus Golden, 2016, 12.5 sacks, and you saw what he and Chandler Jones were able to do when you've got bookends, and now you can't just key on Chandler Jones, although a year ago he led the league with 17 sacks, so he did okay without Markus Golden. But I think everyone knows that this defense is much more dangerous with a Markus Golden on the field than it is not. But there is the other wrinkle on who's been behind Markus Golden. With him out, Benson Mayowa played very, very well. Vonterius Dora, who had 3 sacks in Dallas, has been playing very, very well. And if you're not as confident about your tight ends, then okay, Jermaine, Gresham, we need you. But do the Cardinals feel that they have capable backups if Golden is unable to play, whether that's 2 games or missing the full 6 weeks, because of what they've seen with those 2 players?
Well, you mentioned Mayowa. You throw in Dora and Smith, and then you throw in Chandler Jones. So that's going to be the 4-man rotation until Golden's able to return. We talked about the interior between Kemdici, Peters, and then you throw in Gunter and Pierre. So I really like that rotation. I do think you're going to have to go into the season with 9 defensive linemen because you just don't know when you're going to activate Markus Golden. So they'll have to make some decisions on the roster, and obviously they know this is coming, but the main thing is that you get those premier pass rushers out there. That's going to make it a lot easier for that secondary, and we could see some of those turnovers we were able to see in the preseason without playing a scheme. It was a really vanilla defense and offense. Matter of fact, Michael Bidwell mentioned that he talked about Mike McCoy in the hiring, and he said Mike McCoy hasn't shown anything yet. Wait for week 1. He hasn't shown it. Everything's been vanilla. You beat the guy in front of you, we'll protect the quarterback. We'll try to make a completion here. But he said he hasn't shown anything. So it's going to be interesting to see how this team looks. And I think we know the identity going in. Now we're going to settle on what it is. It's running the football, protecting the quarterback, and obviously stopping the run and trying to win field position.
The effectiveness of a Markus Golden, something that, once again, Ron Wolfley discussed on this week's Big Red Rage.
It's not like Markus Golden got a lot of sacks because he was just quicker than you. He was just going to get the edge and get around the corner and use great speed and explosion to suddenly make a sack. That was not Markus Golden. Markus Golden is going to bite you. He's going to run right over you. He's going to dog you. He's going to outwork you, and he's going to get sacks because of that. It's why I love him, because he epitomizes what this game is all about. This game loves the wretched, the downtrodden, the desperate, the guy that will go out there and give everything that he has and do it with blood under his nails. That's Markus Golden, and that's the reason why he got sacked. So I don't think that ACL is really going to hurt him when he comes back.
Keep in mind, you have Golden and Gresham on your 53-man roster. That's 2 spots that now all of a sudden are locked up with 2 players who you can't use for 2 or 3 weeks or however long it might be if you decide that you don't want them to start on the PUP list, and all of a sudden you're playing a man down both on offense and defense on game days.
Yeah, we know that being on the 53 means you're not on PUP, and that's huge because then you have to be out that 6 to 8 weeks, 6 at least, and then possibly train for a couple weeks. So from that standpoint, they only can dress 46 on game day, and yeah, you don't want to have 2 starters in sweats on the sidelines. But it is what it is. It's part of the game. The injuries. I just hope these guys can play between 12 and 14 games this year. I think that would give this team a huge lift.
Craig Grialou, Mike Jurecki, this is Cards Cover 2 with you Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3 p.m. We'll be with you on Friday when we will have our projected 53-man roster. And, of course, we are live on azcardinals.com/live video. You can search YouTube, search Cards Cover 2, and, of course, via podcast availability, Google Play Music, SoundCloud, or TuneIn. Before we get into the fan questions, the Birdgang Sound-off, do want to mention that the Arizona Cardinals today announced both their high school Wells Fargo coach and players of the week. The head coach, by the way, a familiar name, Arcadia's Kerry Taylor, named the coach of the week. He is 2-0 after the Titans beat Deer Valley 40-21. Kerry Taylor, obviously, local kid out of Hamilton High School, went to ASU, and also a former Cardinal player.
Yeah, and he was one of those guys that was on the bubble, when it came to him being on the roster, and eventually was on the practice squad. He's really active on social media. You could see, and you're more in tune to high school football than I was, at least you were, is that he's done a really good job when it comes to recruiting and selling the program. I mean, the fact that the facilities over there have been upgraded, that's a great story for Kerry Taylor.
And the player of the week, Notre Dame's Jack Smith, who had 480 all-purpose yards as Notre Dame beat Sunny Slope 41-27. So congratulations to Kerry Taylor and Jack Smith. And yeah, high school football in Arizona, a special place in my heart for that. Spent many a Friday night watching some of the best to come out of this state over a decade watching high school football here in Arizona. All right, before we wrap up this show, as promised, we appreciate the comments, the questions via social media using the hashtag CardsCover2. Time for the Bird Gang to sound off, and we'll start with Twitter. And we got the first question, wondering kind of a big picture about the national media. Do you think people are sleeping on the Cardinals too much, or does the national media have a right to be sleeping on the Cardinals?
Well, I mean, I understand, and I talked to somebody in Vegas, and I think the reason why Vegas came out with the 5.5 is because you got a brand new head coach, first-time head coach, in Bradford's injury history. If they signed Kirk Cousins and hired Steve Wilkes, maybe the win total is 8 or 9. Listen, they're not listening to the outside noise. The players in the locker room, the people in this organization, they believe in this team. I think they're going to surprise the national media, and then they'll be writing stories about the Arizona Cardinals. So let them fly under the radar, tally up the wins at the end of the season, and we'll see where they are, because those predictions don't mean anything, because that's the reason why they play the game on the field.
Also from Twitter, is Charles Knopf going to be the third-string quarterback?
I don't think so. I think it's risky if you go into the regular season with Sam Bradford as your starter and then 2 rookie quarterbacks behind him. He's tailed off. He didn't play as well in a previous game, maybe he did in the first couple games, but I do think he'd be an option for the practice squad.
And we'll see a lot of Charles Knopf on Thursday in that preseason finale against the Denver Broncos. Could see him for an entire second half, maybe 3 quarters worth of Charles Knopf, depending on how Coach Wilkes wants to divvy up the quarterback reps if a Josh Rosen does not play. Now to Instagram, will Hassan Reddick, and I think this is a good question because we are expecting a lot out of Reddick, or at least here to kind of have a breakout year, and that's what this user wants to know. Will Hassan Reddick have a breakout season in 2018?
Well, a lot of it's going to be based on where he plays. We know that they're going to play a lot of nickel and dime defense. I would think he'll have a role in this team. I think he's playing his natural position, which is getting on the outside. I think he has the ability, if the running backs catch a screen pass, to make that open field tackle. Is he going to play 50 snaps a game? I don't know about a breakout year, but I think they'll find a role for him, and he'll have an intriguing role with this Cardinals defense.
Speaking of defense, another Instagram user wants to know, what will the role be of Trey Boston, brand new Cardinal from officially signed the first day of training camp?
Well, he likes to hit, and you can never have enough of those guys. He's physical. He really has an eye for the ball. He had 5 interceptions last year. He's really fit into that locker room. He knows Steve Wilkes. He knows the defense. So I think he'll play in the box a little bit with Budda Baker. I think he'll play center field a little bit if a tight end gets the ball and he can hit him there. And I do think they'll rotate him and Antoine Bethea inside and out. So I really like the 3 safeties, the 3 Bs, Baker, Boston, and Bethea.
Another question about the defense. We all know about Patrick Peterson, but what about Jamar Taylor and how he's fit in defensively?
He's fit in really well. He's got good ball skills. You can see he studies the game. You can see he's in. He knows who he's covering on some of those routes. He's a good open field tackler. I like this signing. They didn't give up a ton for him. He was in Cleveland. They've been scouting him for a while. Hopefully, this is something long term where you don't have to chase that, find that opposite corner of Patrick Peterson.
Last question from Instagram. Say hello to Brazil. We've gone international.
Brazil.
So a shout out to Brazil here on Cards
Are
Cover 2.
they at the beach right now? I have no idea what the weather's like right now.
I don't know what the time zone is, but if you're watching it via podcast, enjoy yourself
Props
in Brazil.
to you.
The question, though, is who will be the best rookie for the Arizona Cardinals?
Wow. Well, Mason Cole, he's probably not going to get the credit because he's not going to fill up the stat sheet. But anytime you throw in a rookie center and he's got a lot of veterans around, but I'll go on a limb here. And if he gets the opportunity behind David Johnson, I think Chase Edmonds can really.
You think he'll have enough opportunities, enough snaps in order to, because as you mentioned, the easy answer to that is Mason Cole, because he'll be involved in every single snap offensively. It just will be difficult for the fans because no one pays attention to the offense. Well, that's true.
Right, I mean, but he looks the part. I love his size, 6'5", 307. I just think Chase Edmonds is a change of pace back. He's a guy that can go out in motion. He's a guy that can go out for a pass. They could throw a screen pass, and he can run between the tackles. So if there's one rookie besides Rosen, if he gets a chance to play, and Mason Cole, maybe even Christian Kirk we should throw in there. But I think Chase Edmonds is the guy that I would mention.
And if Trent Sherfield, an undrafted rookie free agent, should make this team, or Dietrich Nichols, I mean, we've talked more about this 2018 rookie class and overall the rookies that have been here in camp. I don't know if there's been this much anticipation about a rookie class and rookies in general in a long time.
Regardless if Rosen sees the field this year, second-round pick is going to be your punt returner. He's going to be in the rotation at wide receiver. Mason Cole is going to be your starting center. Chase Edmonds will be a change of pace back. The only guy that I'm not sitting here today for sure he's going to make the roster is Chris Campbell. The Cardinals only had 6 draft picks. He could. I like his size. You're going to subject him to the waiver wire. And then Corey Cunningham, who could be the swing tackle next year. This is really impressive. Now, they only had 6 draft picks because they parlayed that to move up to get Rosen. But I think this class is going to contribute right away versus waiting for after Thanksgiving, which the previous staff thought rookies really start to turn the corner a little bit.
And that is our Birdgang Sound-off here on Cards Cover 2. Keep them coming. We'll be with you on Friday as well, 3 p.m. Hashtag Cards Cover 2. Hashtag Cards Cover 2, using the number 2 to get involved in the show. Of course, Thursday night, the preseason finale, Cardinals and Denver Broncos at 7 p.m. at University of Phoenix Stadium. 3:30 of the pregame coverage here on the Arizona Cardinals Radio Network. And then MJ will be with you again on Friday for a little recap and then our 53-man roster. And then next week, Monday's show, we're into the regular season.
Bring on the Redskins.
Just bring on football in general.
Oh, this home opener, man. You got to get this game.
Week 1, September 9th. That is, the Cardinals will open against the Washington Redskins. Appreciate everyone's involvement behind the scenes. Special thanks to Tim Delaney, Jim Omohundro, Devin Henry, Jeremy Schnell, plus Grant Greeley, Jonathan Hayward, Brandon Natus, and Jackson Sipes. For Mike Jurecki, I'm Craig Grialou. We'll talk to you. Cards Cover 2 on Friday, 3 p.m.